Hey guys, Canadian Range Nut here. It is Thursday, June the 16th, 2022. Hope you guys are having a great night. Just wanted to say thanks to everybody for subscribing. Seem to be getting a lot of support with the channel, so that's awesome. A bit of a longer episode again tonight, so a few things I wanted to talk about. So number one, I finally purchased my conservative membership. So if you're going to do that, I think it cost me about $15, not about, it actually did cost that. And it basically gives you the right to vote when they're going for leadership and stuff like that. Now, I did miss the vote. I just hope and pray that Poilievre is going to get the leadership, but I guess we'll have to see what happens with that. But I just figured I'd put my money towards them anyway, because we're going to need all the help we can get. Second thing I want to talk about is in the Parliament today, they were grilling Mendicino and Trudeau, basically trying to get him to resign. Third thing I want to talk about is after the gun ban announcement, some gun owners on Vancouver, gun owners, it said gun hobbyists actually from Vancouver Island were just giving their reaction to it. And then I came across a video from the Edmonton Sun talking about if the ban is going to work. And they were talking to one of the anti-gun advocacy groups, and you'll be surprised what he had to say. Another thing I want to talk about is MP Larry Brock was grilling Chrystia Freeland about the Emergencies Act. And so that was an interesting video. There's a new bill coming up. This is the fifth thing. The new bill coming up on online censorship, which, according to Anthony Furey from the Toronto Sun, the Liberals pushed through a couple of nights ago. The seventh thing, I'm losing track of the count now. The next thing I want to talk about was this is for the U.S. Dan Crenshaw, if you don't know who he is, he's a representative. A Republican representative in the States. He's the guy with the eye patch, if you don't know. Former Navy SEAL. He talks about what his thoughts are on the red flag laws. And then finally, the last thing I just wanted to talk about is not really gun related, but it is related to the way this government acts, is apparently they're going to be doing a new definition for what it means to be fully vaccinated. So again, if there's a certain areas that you don't feel like listening to, just feel free to skip ahead, obviously. And once again, please remember to like or subscribe if you do enjoy the content. And please remember to share it out to your friends as well, who you think might be interested in this stuff. Okay, so first thing I wanted to get to is this grilling in the House of Commons. That we start off with Candice Bergen talking to Trudeau, and Trudeau is, he's there virtually. So I'm going to start that off right now.
Canadians should be able to trust that what their government tells them is the truth. Telling the truth is especially important when setting the serious precedent of invoking the Emergencies Act. We now know the Minister of Public Safety has been misleading Canadians. No police force asked for the act. He knows it. We all know it. There was no misunderstanding. The minister has lost credibility and trust. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and ask the Minister of Public Safety to step away from his duties?
Okay, so now I understand this is a typical thing in politics where each side is, as soon as the one person lies or gets caught in a lie, they'll ask that person to resign or demand that they resign. Now, if you don't know the background on this, or if you're new to the channel, basically they're talking about Marco Mendicino. He is the public minister of public safety, and he is actually one of the guys responsible for implementing the new handgun freeze that they want to implement, and that handgun ban as well. So I'll just give you Trudeau's response.
The Honourable Minister. When illegal blockades paralyzed our economy, hurt workers and communities, police, municipal and provincial leadership told us more tools were needed to bring them to an end. The former Ottawa police chief said at the time, "We cannot do it alone, and we're grateful for what they provided, but we need more." And even Alberta's Minister of Municipal Affairs wrote that the local RCMP, quote, "have exhausted all local and regional options. We listened, we determined that the Emergencies Act had the tools necessary to end this, and it worked." Honorable Leader of the...
Okay, and if you're wondering, if you didn't listen to any of the other episodes, if you're wondering where I stood with on the trucker issue, I was fully behind the truckers because it was after 2 years of lockdowns and stuff like that. Enough was enough. And if you didn't know, I did go to one of the rallies that where they had the truckers coming through the city going on their way to Ottawa, and it was perfectly peaceful. There was no racism and stuff like that. So despite what mainstream news says, that did not happen. I did not see any of that stuff, and I went by myself, guys. I didn't go with any friends or anything like that, and I felt perfectly safe. So let's just continue with this.
Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there is no misunderstanding, and this is too important to try to skew the words. This is vitally important. No police officers or agencies asked for the act to be invoked. The Minister of Public Safety said that they did. He was not telling the truth. He misled Canadians. He cannot be trusted. He has lost the confidence of this House to do his job. Has he lost the confidence of the Prime Minister? Will the Prime Minister ask him to resign?
Honorable Prime Minister.
And they actually confirmed with Bill Blair as well that none of the police forces did ask for the Emergencies Act to be implemented.
Let us be very clear, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, there's that word very clear again, like I mentioned before. Remember, I warned, if you hear a politician say, let me be clear, that's the scariest part ever, because you know it's part of like a scripted response.
Enforcement should never be able to grant themselves extraordinary powers. That's up to government to choose to do, as we did with the Emergencies Act. But once in place, the Emergencies Act allowed police to, according to the Commissioner of the RCMP, refuse entry of individuals traveling to the illegal protest with the intent of participating. It gave police, quote, the power to arrest individuals who continue to supply fuel, food, and other materials, and to compel individuals to provide essential towing services. Canadians remember how the leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker,
I don't know why it got cut off there, but this is actually from the CPAC website, so here we go.
the minister has abdicated and failed in his responsibility to be truthful with Canadians. He is a lawyer and a former federal prosecutor. He knows full well how to choose his words carefully. He knows full well how to be precise in his language. Yet he said over and over again that law enforcement requested the Emergencies Act. Those were his words. We now know his words were not true. How can the Prime Minister have any faith in this minister? Will he ask this minister to resign?
Okay, so that clip ends there, and I just want to make a point too. If you look at the conservative side, and then you look at the Liberal NDP side in Parliament, it's just hilarious because the majority of the Conservatives have stopped wearing their masks. And you know what? I don't care if you want to wear a mask, guys. Go ahead. I think they're useless. If you want to wear it, that's great. That's your choice. No problem. But when you're trying to force other people to do it, that's a problem for me. But so anyway, when you look at the Liberal side, they're all wearing their masks. And I saw a video the other day too of one of the MPs realizing that she was actually on camera. She didn't have her mask on. So once somebody kind of nudged her and said, "Oh, the camera's on you," she just tried to sneakily put her mask on. So the masks of the Liberals are just one giant show. And I know politics does tend to be a giant show, but it just seems like with the Liberals, the NDP and the left, it's an even bigger show. At least the Conservatives do believe in a smaller government, which is, I think after the last 2 years, I think we can all agree that a smaller government does make more sense because the bigger it gets, it just seems the more they want to hang on to power. Okay, so the next clip I want to play for you guys is a clip from Pierre Poilievre. And I'm pretty sure it's during the same session here. And here he's grilling Trudeau as well. And let me just say, I pray to God this guy gets the leadership for the Conservatives, because I think if he doesn't end up winning that leadership, I do think we're in big trouble as far as the Conservative Party goes. Here we go.
Not once, not twice, but 13 times did this public safety minister claim the police told him to suspend people's civil liberties with the Emergencies Act. Not only did the cops say that's not true, but yesterday, two of his fellow ministers, including the deputy prime minister, said it's not true. And today, the prime minister refused to say that his public safety minister had acted honorably.
I just want to stop it there for a second. So a lot of people, I told you guys I voted PPC before, and I regret voting it because I just feel like I wasted my vote. But I really love how Poilievre always takes whoever he's talking about to account with specific details. A lot of people also criticized Poilievre for not speaking out against mandates earlier and stuff like that. But if you look back to a lot of the people, a lot of the conservative people who spoke out against lockdowns and stuff like that, they did get ousted from the Conservative Party. So he's kind of got that going for him. And again, I really don't see what choice we have. I like him. I don't know what you guys think. Put down in the comments what you think of Poilievre. I think he's our best chance for Conservative leader. But let's continue with this.
If his fellow ministers don't think he is honorable and truthful, why is he still in cabinet?
Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, while the member opposite concerns himself supposedly with the freedom of Canadians to protest illegally, we're going to continue to stand with Canadians who had their lives disrupted by the illegal blockades and protesters who took such lengths to try and shut down our economy over the month of February.
So what I love about that statement is I remember when all this stuff was happening live, I was following it every day. This government seems to have no, and I'm talking provincial government as well, they seem to have no problem shutting down the economy of their own accord because of COVID. But when people have had enough and decide to go and peacefully protest, and that's exactly what it was, a peaceful protest, they seem to have an issue with that. And I remember getting into an argument with this about this with my cousin, actually, and she had a problem with them when I don't know if you guys remember when they were at the Montana-Alberta border. They were shutting down that border, and you know what? I was all for it, and I'll tell you why. Because it was done peacefully. She had an issue with it because the economy was losing billions of dollars. But I remember I responded to her and I said, well, wait a sec. You weren't very vocal about the government shutting down restaurants. How many people lost their businesses during the lockdown? I had my best friend actually committed suicide because of these lockdowns. So, I was all for the truckers, and she couldn't give me an answer on that. So his response, Trudeau's response here, is absolutely ridiculous. And again, he's trying to appeal to those people who think these, when they say supposed freedom, it's like, no, it is not supposed freedom. We are supposed to be free in this country, but clearly we're going kind of the other way.
We have continued to work with police officers, with services, with local authorities to give them the tools we needed, and ultimately chose to invoke the Emergencies Act to keep Canadians safe and to put an end to these barricades.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
Disrupting people's lives? This from the guy who took away the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people because of an unscientific mandate that robbed them of their individual freedom.
I'm going to interrupt the Honourable Member. We were doing so well. I just don't want to ruin it.
So he's just pausing them now because I guess because there's a lot of heckling going on.
Please calm down. And the Honourable Member for Carleton from the top, please.
This disrupting people's lives. This is a prime minister who disrupted the lives of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people because of a personal medical decision. Everything this government has been saying about our truckers has been false from the very beginning, starting with the claim that they would spread a virus even though they're in a truck all alone all day long, and ending with the recent claim that the police had asked for the Emergencies Act. Now that the government has admitted that the public safety minister stated falsehoods, will the prime minister do the honorable thing and fire him?
And in case you're wondering, guys, I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any means. I have all my vaccines from when I was a kid and stuff like that. I did end up getting this vaccine. I didn't want to because I didn't think I needed it. I'm 44. I'm fairly healthy. And I just didn't think I needed it. And I also saw the precedent of going down that road where you're forcing vaccines on people. So if you're wondering where I stand on that issue, I did have a big issue with that. And again, I didn't want to get it. I got my 2 doses. And so I was all for the truckers again in that, because when they're traveling across the border, you're by yourself. But anyway, let's continue with this.
Prime Minister. Speaker, every step of the way throughout this global pandemic, we had Canadians' backs, and that meant ensuring that we followed science, that we did everything necessary to keep people safe, and that we did everything necessary to make sure our economy would spring back as quickly as possible. Now, the member opposite knows full well that he stood against our scientific measures to keep Canadians safe. He stood against the measures we put forward to support small businesses, to support families, to get through this pandemic, and indeed stood against the measures that have led us to recovering 115% of the jobs lost during the pandemic, when the U.S. has only recovered 95%. We had Canadian.
Meanwhile, our inflation rate is getting ridiculously out of control. There's rumors of inflation going up, the interest rates going up to like, I think they said 30 or 40% or something in the next couple of years. And I love how Trudeau can never give specific details. It's always the same old rhetoric. We are helping Canadians. And I can't stand the way he says Canadians too. It just bugs me for some reason. Anyway, here we go.
Backs, Mr. Speaker. That's what we were doing during the pandemic.
Okay, so it ends there. So make sure comment on that, whatever you want to say about that. Okay, next thing we're going to get into is I want to talk about, this is a report from CTV. It talks about Vancouver Island hobbyists and their reaction after Trudeau mentioned the handgun ban. So here we go.
The federal government is falling in the crosshairs of Vancouver Island gun owners after an historic announcement aimed at freezing the sale of handguns. Island shooters say the law will do little to curb gun crimes in this country. CTV's Brendan Strain has more.
The Victoria Fish and Game Club is made up of more than 5,000 members.
Over 2,700 shoot handguns.
It will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada.
The new federal bill was created in part by victims of gun violence, and it will put a freeze on handgun ownership. That is not sitting well with the president of the association.
The first thing this is going to adversely impact is shooting sports in Canada, which are Olympic sports.
So I've mentioned that to you guys before. This is basically going to destroy all the shooting sport businesses. The gun stores, they're going to end up shutting down, because most of their majority of their sales come from handguns as well, right? You're taking away like half of people's businesses.
A recent report from Statistics Canada found the rates of firearm-related violent crimes are on the rise in this country.
Does not address the people who are using firearms to commit violent crime.
Bancroft says the guns used in those crimes are not being purchased legally here in Canada. Instead, they are being smuggled over the border from the U.S. Like this example from a few weeks back, when a drone crashed in Ontario after crossing the border. Attached, a bag containing 11 handguns.
Okay, so if you, I think most of you should know what a drone is. If you don't know what a drone is, it's basically a robot that flies in the sky. And in this case, the guns were being smuggled with a bag connected to the drone, because you can get like drones that hold a ton of weight. And it ended up, the criminals were smuggling these guns from the States using a drone. So if it gets caught, no big deal, right? Here we go.
An all-out ban on handguns is the right approach. Gets a mixed reaction on the street.
I agree. We don't really need handguns.
Do you think handguns are a problem in Canada?
I don't see an issue with them.
I'm anti-gun on most of it, unless it's used for hunting, and you don't need them for hunting, so yeah.
Under the tabled legislation.
And I know a lot of people who hunt in the States, actually, who do keep a handgun with them for hunting, just simply for the fact that if they want to give a distress signal, or they'll just have it like strapped to their chest or whatever, just to have that extra ammo with them. So for a person who says you don't need one for hunting, once again, arrogant comment, doesn't know what she's talking about, and she's probably never held a gun in her life, and probably has no clue what the rules are here.
It will become illegal to transfer a firearm.
That's a 9 mil, that's a 22 mil.
Lily Wall is new to the sport. and recently got her restricted gun license. Today, her father was teaching her to use a handgun, but when the time comes, the proposed bill would bar him from gifting it to his daughter.
It's bizarre, especially because then what do you do with, well, they were his and he purchased them, so now what do we do with them? Are they just going to be taken away, or, there's no way that we can actually use them?
If the bill passes, over time, handguns will be phased out in Canada.
We're capping the market for handguns.
Handgun hobbyists say they are being targeted, and this bill will do nothing to decrease violent gun-related crimes in Canada.
Okay, and obviously we are being targeted. Sorry, I just got to pause this here. Sorry, guys. Yeah, obviously we are being targeted. So the thing that really bugs me is the fact that you've got some people who might have, they might have guns from maybe the 1800s or something like that, like antique guns. And for you not to be able to leave that to your family just really does not sit well with me. Because again, you got to think of the big picture here. If they can do this with guns, it sets a precedent, right? What else would they be able to do later in the future if they deem you own something inappropriate, or they think is something that the government considers to be dangerous? So that's a big issue with me. This next interview from the Edmonton Sun is basically, it's a reporter talking to an anti-gun advocate. Now, this guy's not the typical anti-gun advocate. He actually seems pretty reasonable. He's part of a group that had family, I guess, killed in gun violence. And when I say reasonable, just check it out. You'll know what I mean.
One day after the federal Liberals proposed a very strict gun law that would essentially ban handguns across Canada, reaction has been flooding in from various sectors of society, including people who have been personally harmed by gun violence, and people who are trying to stamp it out. Louis March is the head of Zero Gun Violence Movement, joins us now in Toronto. Louis, what's your reaction to this ban?
Okay, so again, he's the head of Zero Gun Violence Movement. That's who this guy is.
It's been 7 years in the making. So I was expecting a lot more in terms of really addressing the gun violence problem, but going deeper, a deeper dive into what's causing it and addressing what's going on. So in Toronto so far this year, we've had 159 shootings compared to this time last year. It's a 20% increase in number of shootings. That's more than one per day. Gun homicides, we've had 19. That's a 58% increase from what we had last year. So despite everything that's being done, the gun violence trends are trending in the wrong direction. The legislation that was proposed yesterday, if that was in play for the last year, would that have an impact on these numbers? Mm-hmm. The answer is no.
And why is that?
Okay, so even this guy who is an anti-gun advocate here, even he knows that targeting registered firearm owners is going to do zero to target crime. We already know that, but it's actually kind of nice to see that one of these organizations is actually saying, well, it's not going to make a difference. You're targeting law-abiding gun owners. Let's continue with this.
Because the guns that are used in criminal activity are not with registered gun owners, right? 82% of the guns found at crime scenes in Toronto are illegally smuggled guns across the border. Mm-hmm. Someone that's going to take up guns in a criminal activity are not going to be registered gun holders. Like, why would you? Mm-hmm. Right? So this deals with one aspect of the problem, but does it go deep enough? And it's not deep enough because what was blatantly missing yesterday was the provincial government and the municipal government. They all have different roles in stemming this problem of gun violence. One cannot do it without the other two working together. Mm-hmm.
It actually makes a great point about that too, that you need all levels of government to work together. And that's not to say that you still need to ban handguns from licensed individuals who are already registered. Obviously, they need to work on enforcement and going after these guns and gangs.
The feds have certain responsibilities in terms of border control.
Yeah.
The province has certain responsibility, and the city has certain responsibilities. Doug Ford was not there because Doug Ford did not agree with much of what was said yesterday in terms of gun control.
What do you think should be done to address all the illegal weapons that are out there?
There's not a simple answer to it. We have the largest border.
Once again, it's a breath of fresh air to hear this guy say there's no simple answer to it. Because a lot of times when you talk to these organizations, these anti-gun organizations, their simple idea is, well, ban all handguns. Just get rid of them. That'll solve the problem. But no, it's not going to solve the problem.
We're the biggest manufacturer of guns in the world. We can stop as many at the border as we can, but we can't tell you how many got through. The federal government says that they've been able to, they doubled the amount of guns that they stopped at the border last year compared to the year before. But they can't tell us how many they didn't stop. We used to have 1 and 2 guns in a community, Scott, that used to be borrowed, rented, stolen in criminal activity. I've got people working with me who are alive because somebody pointed a handgun at them and it didn't work. Like when you're renting a gun, you don't test it out, right? So now we have kids in the street with 1 and 2 guns themselves.
So if you listen to what he just said, though, like literally, we're talking about like gangbangers and stuff like that, and people renting a gun off somebody, paying them to use that gun, and then them giving them back. Once again, obviously illegal guns, right? So it's just very interesting to get this guy's side of the story here.
And it's not handguns; it's semi-automatics, right? So it's a different type of gun culture.
Last question. What do you tell people who are deeply affected by this? I was speaking to, the mother of Caden Francis, who was killed last July, and she said that, obviously she's still heartbroken. What do you tell them about this push and about this effort?
They have to make their voices be heard. A lot of people, when you lose your children to gun violence, you retreat. You become an introvert. You don't think anybody wants to hear. But they need to hear the agony, the pain, the trauma, the grief that you are going through. Because we, in Toronto, it's a resourceful, internationally acclaimed city. When we put our mind to something, we normally solve it. But we've never seen this as a priority. Right? It's been a priority only for political reason.
Oh, and just so you know, the dog barking is in the actual CTV video, guys. So that's not where I am right now.
When it was necessary. So those people that have been impacted, don't give up. You need to make your voice be heard. Work with others that share the same pain and agony because they will understand what you're going through. Organize. Advocate. The government needs to understand that this is not a problem just for a small percentage of the population with criminal-minded intention. Look on the impact. Look on the destruction.
So the video they're showing right now is on Jane Street, and there's a shootout going on. This happened in November of 2020. So that's the background they're giving as he's speaking here.
That you have created. It's difficult to encourage them because they're dealing with their own personal grief and trauma and pain.
And that's forever that they're dealing with.
Yes, this is not something where there's an on and off switch, right? But there's other people that have similar type pains and agony and grief and trauma. Work with them.
Very encouraging, though, once again, how this guy is not just saying get rid of all handguns, because he does realize we are not the problem. So it's good to know that those people are out there. And it just shows you, too, how the government, not just here, but in the United States, will jump on whatever incident happens and just play with the emotions of people.
Advocate, organize, let your voice be heard. Because I don't think the politicians, whether they're at the feds or at the province, or really have listened. I know yesterday they had people who have been impacted, but I'm looking at them and I couldn't recognize most of them. And I work with mothers who have lost children to gun violence, right? So it seems as though it was more like a production yesterday, but the real people on the street that are grieving, that are hurting, right? There's nothing that we can do to take it away.
So when he's talking about a production, he's actually speaking about the day that Trudeau first announced the gun freeze. And if you did watch that press conference, he had a lot of people who are supposedly representing anti-gun groups. This guy is from an anti-gun group, and he's saying he didn't recognize any of those people there. And that just shows you how much theater is involved in these politics, because even he thought it was like a production, which that's exactly what it looked like.
But what we can do is advocate for change, legitimate change that will prevent the next cycle of violence from happening.
Louis, thank you very much.
So the only thing I feel like this dude was missing here was the fact that I feel like everybody's always afraid to talk about like minimum sentences and harsher penalties and stuff like that. In my opinion, and again, you can disagree with me on this, put it in the comments if you want to. The harsher the penalty, I feel like the less crime you're going to get. And people can say, well, with poverty and all this stuff, yeah, that's, if people are born in poverty, they're going to do it anyway. Yeah, that's great. But then they shouldn't be back out on the street, which is what happens with a lot of these criminals, and therefore you're getting more crime happening. I do believe you got to go for the root cause as far as poverty and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's just some evil people out there. Like, let's face that. I remember when I was going to university, people were like, "Oh, does evil really exist? Or is it just are you just do you just come from your conditions type thing?" It's like, no. And especially as I got older, you start to realize some people are just evil people and they need to be locked up. That's just the way it is. But then you have a lot, I love the term bleeding heart. I just think it's hilarious. A lot of bleeding heart liberals who are just like, that poor guy. Look at the guy who just who ran over those people in Toronto a few years ago. He's going to get a chance for parole in 25 years because the Supreme Court said it's unjustified. So we would need to really take a look at our justice system. And again, I've said that a few times in a lot of these videos. All right, next thing I want to talk about is this is a little exchange between Larry Brock and Chrystia Freeland, and he's grilling her on what happened during the Emergencies Act. And the reason, again, not really related to guns directly, but it shows how smug this government has become, and they literally don't care to be questioned, and they never answer the questions. Let's face it. None of these politicians ever do answer the questions, so just take a listen to this.
Mr. Freeland, you'll agree with me that the state-owned, taxpayer-funded Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reported on February the 10th, 2022, that the GoFundMe donations to the convoy protest came from donors located outside of Canada. You'd agree with that?
I don't have the report in front of me, and I haven't memorized all CBC reports, but I'm prepared to believe you.
In fact, they stated that the donations came from America, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, and the Netherlands. You'd also accept that as fact?
I don't see the article before me, but you say that's what it says.
They even claimed that the convoy might be Russian funded. Do you recall that?
Do you ever notice that this is always a little tactic of liberals? Whenever there's something happening that they don't like, everything always seems to be Russian funded. Trump was supported by the Russians, which they actually found to be false. They tried to impeach him so many times. Everything. I remember they were even when Doug Ford was running for election in Ontario, they were even trying to say he had ties to the Russians as well. And I was just like, all right, this is getting ridiculous. Anyway, let's continue with this.
Reading from the article.
Yes. On March 21st, 2002, the CBC, without any explanation, without apology, without any clarity, retracted their story regarding the funding of the protest. You were aware of that?
Again, I'm not speaking for the CBC. I'm speaking for
I'm not
the
asking
Ministry
you to
of
speak
Finance.
for the CBC. I'm asking, were you informed that the CBC retracted the story, the false story, about foreign funding donations to the convoy?
Again, Mr. Brock, I don't believe that the CBC is being interrogated here. I believe it's the government of Canada.
Just answer the question, Minister.
And by the way, she's got a smirk when she's answering this guy. Just again, total arrogance on her part. And the fact that the CBC actually retracted an article, that just shows you how serious this is. If the CBC, which is basically funded by Trudeau, by the Trudeau government, retracts something, that's when you know things are really bad.
Mr. Freeland, were you aware, yes or no? It's a simple question.
I don't have the article before me, and I'm not here to answer questions about the CBC.
The Deputy Prime Minister, the most senior cabinet minister, is not prepared to accept whether or not the CBC retracted a false story?
I don't speak for the CBC, sir.
You, as the most senior cabinet minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, relied upon that initial story from the CBC and shared your concerns with Canadians regarding terrorism funding and money laundering. Your words, correct?
Let me be very clear.
Oh, she said that word again. Let me be very clear. In other words, she's buying time to think of an answer.
My principal concern when it comes to the illegal occupation and the illegal blockades is the economic harm that was
Let me
done
be
to
very
Canada.
clear, Minister Freeland. Your words several times in the House referred to terrorism funding and money laundering. Are you saying you didn't use those words?
I am speaking here today, and I am talking about the central motivation.
So again, I don't know about you guys, and I apologize if this is infuriating you, but I think it is important, especially if you share this with friends. Now, diehard liberals are not going to care; they probably love her, but just, like, listen to her tone, and she just refuses. Again, all politicians usually refuse to answer the questions, but this is during an inquiry into the Emergencies Act. I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember when there was a building where somebody had locked the doors in Ottawa and they had set the building on fire? They had tried to blame the convoy for that, and then a couple months later, it came out that it was not any people from the convoy, but even Jagmeet Singh, our NDP friend, had basically blamed the convoy and refused to take that back. So again, it just shows you how corrupt this government is. I'm probably gonna get taken away in a black bag now, but whatever.
Of our very serious
And
actions.
I'm here to ask you questions, and I expect, unlike question period, I expect a response. So my response is, do you recall using the words terrorism funding and money laundering in the House and reporting outside the House? Yes or no, Minister Freeland?
I believe if we were in a court of law where I think you once worked, that might be called badgering the witness, Mr. Brock.
Chair?
Yeah.
Can we allow the question to be answered?
Thank you. As I said, my core concern as Minister of Finance and my central justification for these very serious measures that we put in place, as was clear in my opening statement.
You're not
as I
answering the
have said
question. I'm going to move on.
is the economic
You're not
impact.
answering the question, and I will move on.
Madam Chair, on a point of order.
The witness may not like the questions, but she's not entitled to establish her own facts in responding to an answer that is non-responsive and not relevant to the question.
I just got to say, I wish we had more politicians like this who will actually call people out on not answering their question. But again, it does feel like a big show we're watching here. There's only 30 seconds left of this.
I'd actually just, we'll move back 20 seconds, allow you to ask your last question.
Do you agree with me that the Deputy Director of FinTrack, Mr. McKillop, confirmed at committee that the convoy funding did not come from terrorism funding or money laundering, and the typical person who donated hundreds and thousands of dollars to the convoy came from their own resources and posed no security threat? Do you accept that?
What I accept, Mr. Brock, is that the core threat was to the Canadian economy, to our reputation as a trading partner and investment destination.
Thank you
I
for
made
the
that clear in
non-response,
my
Minister.
opening remarks, and that is my view.
Thank you for the non-response, Minister. Very helpful.
We'll move to
So this is who we have in government. Pretty disgusting, if you ask my opinion. And again, just answering zero questions. And if you remember, they froze the bank accounts of a lot of people who did donate. If they donated a large amount. And remember, they shut down the GoFundMe. If you remember, I think it was Tamara Lynch, when they arrested her, and they kept her in prison for a long time, without, she couldn't even get out on bail. Yet you've got these guys who are shooting people up, and they're getting out on bail on the weekend. right? It makes zero sense. Okay, next one I want to share with you guys this is from Anthony Furey. If you don't know who he is, he's a columnist with the Toronto Sun. This is talking about the Liberals' censorship bill, internet censorship bill that they want to push through. This bill would basically allow for, like, it would prevent YouTube channels like mine to go on. It basically, if I don't, I guess, toe the line as far as what the Trudeau Liberals think, and the NDP, let's face it, think would be acceptable online. So basically, there goes your free speech right there. So I'll let him, here's Anthony Furey.
While Canadians slept Tuesday evening, the Liberal government rammed through a controversial piece of legislation in committee that will give them the power to regulate your social media and your YouTube posts. I wish I was exaggerating, but
the power to regulate your social media and YouTube posts. So again, I run into the Liberals a lot of the time. They're like, we have free speech. That's not free speech. I don't care if you disagree with me. If you disagree with me, that's great. You should have the right to disagree with me. That's what free speech is. Whether or not you hurt my feelings, whatever, we should all have the right to free speech.
The top experts in the field have all said this legislation is problematic, it's seriously flawed, it needs to be changed or completely abandoned, and the Liberals wouldn't listen to them. You don't believe me? Here's a headline from CBC. Your free speech is at risk with Ottawa's push to regulate online content. Well, stories in the CBC are saying Justin Trudeau's gone too far. I hope we can all agree that means Justin Trudeau has gone too far. Now, Professor Michael Geist at the University of Ottawa, he's one of the top experts on this issue. I did a full podcast with him, an hour-long conversation on this legislation, previously called Bill C-10. Now it's known as Bill C-11. And he put up a new blog post in response to what happened Tuesday evening. By the way, this happened Tuesday evening, technically Wednesday morning at 12:15 a.m. That's when the Liberals rammed through this flawed piece of legislation.
So 12:15 a.m. It just shows you how sneaky this government really is.
Through committee. What that means is you can no longer change it, and you can no longer have expert discussion and tinker with it and make it better. Instead, it's now definitely going to the House of Commons, where Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh are going to use their coalition deal to push this bill forward. Here's what Michael Geist had to say. He says with roughly 170 amendments proposed by 5 parties, there is only time for a fraction of the amendments to be reviewed. He says that the voting ran past midnight with the public left with little idea of what is in or out of the bill. The updated bill will be posted in the next day or so. The sham process notably excluded debate on many of the proposed amendments on regulating user content.
So basically that's code for the Liberals pushing through whatever they want in their bill.
So many experts stepping forward and saying, look, we appreciate there's part of these bills where you want to change the CRTC, the Broadcasting Act, that has to do with completely different issues. But what you're doing here is you're also giving yourself the power to censor people's social media, user-generated content, they called it. This was what the community was saying. This was the outcry. And the government had the opportunity to revise it, and they didn't. And instead, they've passed a bill, or at least they've put forward this bill, past committee. It's going to be passed soon. We're not even really sure what's in it, but it's all done now. Wow, it actually happened. Well, if you got something to say it now. Smoke them if you got them, because the famous Liberal internet censorship bill looks like it's going through as is.
So I like how it says smoke them if you got them. So yeah, so there you have it on the censorship bill. And remember, that's not just affecting people who are on YouTube and stuff. That's affecting you guys with your Facebook, your Instagram posts, all that stuff would be in play. So anything criticizing the government, they could potentially go after that as well. And they're going to. The fact that, again, if they froze the bank accounts of these protesters from the trucker protesters, do you really think they're going to have a problem limiting what you say on the internet? Of course not. Okay, second last thing I wanted to talk about. I've got 2 more things here. So this is a video I came across. This is more United States material now, dealing with the red flag law. So this is a Republican representative named Dan Crenshaw. Now, if you don't know who Dan Crenshaw is, he's a former Navy SEAL, and he's now working in I believe it's the House. I could be wrong about that. So those guys in the U.S. just correct me if I'm wrong. Very interesting guy. He actually wrote a book a couple of years ago, which I actually purchased. Great book. His experience is totally interesting. If you don't know who he is, he's the guy with the eye patch. So I'm just going to play this for you. This is I got this from Fox News here, and they're just asking him what he thinks of the red flag laws. And the reason I respect Dan Crenshaw is he was against lockdowns from the beginning, even when I was pro lockdown for the COVID stuff in the beginning. Crenshaw was totally against it. He's saying you're going to ruin jobs. He's been pretty consistent throughout. So just take a listen.
Joining us now, former Navy SEAL and the host of Hold These Truths podcast, Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw. Congressman, that's a brief history of the Second Amendment. It's not going anywhere. Did President Biden help the debate on Wednesday night? Did he help the debate with his speech after the shooting?
No. Look, I mean, I think they're doing the same thing that they always do after there's a mass shooting. They politicize it, and they try to convince America that you can actually legislate away these extremely rare and anomalous events. And these are very evil events. And I think they make us all cringe. I think they make us all very upset. And that's understandable. But then we have to take a step back and take the emotion out of it and think, okay, what policy do we enact to prevent these things? Are these things preventable? Can you see these mass shooters ahead of time? What kind of contagion is infecting our young people and our old people that they seek to engage in these dramatic mass killings ever since Columbine happened? These are really difficult questions, and you can't politicize it or put emotion in front of reason.
It's a great point, though. Like as far before Columbine happened, I don't know about you guys, we didn't see mass shootings to this level. I know we had the one in Canada at the Montreal University as well, but not to this extent. And you can't say that the States didn't have guns, before Columbine. They still had a ton. It's interesting. So, like, what exactly happened? And I got let's see what he says.
This time feels a little different. I really sense there's a sincerity. Your House bill is just Nancy Pelosi spouting off. It's going to go nowhere. But in the Senate, they seem to be working very constructively. Mm-hmm. And Matthew McConaughey pointed that out. I want you to hear what he had to say.
We need responsible gun ownership. Responsible gun ownership. We need background checks. We need to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 rifle to 21. We need a waiting period for those rifles. We need red flag laws and consequences for those who abuse them.
Well, we'll take that one by one. He went on to say the consensus is he's hearing there's praise on both sides. So first off, Beto O'Rourke says AR-15 should be banned. Others are saying up to 21. Where do you stand on any of this?
Well, obviously, I'm not giving up my AR-15. That's mine. It's not happening. So I'm pretty clear on that. Look, raising the age to 21. I mean, if you're going to talk about that, then you just need to change what it is to be an adult in America. We just need to have that conversation about all aspects of how young people act and mature. So I don't think an arbitrary 21 versus 18 is really going to change a whole lot of things when it comes to gun violence.
Yeah, and I have to agree with him on that, because I remember when they first mentioned that idea, I remember thinking, well, wait a sec, though. If you're going to change that to 21, then really you need to change military service age to 21, and then what else are you going to change to 21 as well? And yeah, like I don't think it doesn't really... It's a tough topic, because it's like it doesn't really make sense that you can't drink, but then you can buy a gun in the States. But at the same time, too, the whole reason for the Second Amendment is to prevent a tyrannical government. So that kind of is a wash then in itself. But yeah, like if you're going to play that game with the raising to 21, then you're going to have to raise a lot of things to 21 too. Let's see what else he has to say.
I think with the Senate, I don't have a lot of insight on what the senators are talking about right now. From what I understand, they're talking about expanding background checks for somebody who's 18, 19, 20, 21 to their juvenile history.
How do you feel about that?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, look, if you're 18 and you have a terrible juvenile history, but we can't look at it in a background check, and you turn We should be able to look at that.
Yeah, I totally agree with him on that too. And I know there's some people out there who'd be like, "Well, it's Second Amendment, But again, if you have have a criminal history, a violent criminal history, then you shouldn't be able to have a gun. It's as simple as that. Let's see what else he says.
That should be part of the analysis on your background check. So some of this stuff seems really reasonable. When it comes to red flag laws, look, despite what all the trolls on the internet say, I'm really not for red flag laws. And primarily, look, there's good arguments and bad arguments about this, and there's a lot of misconceptions on both sides of this argument. But fundamentally, with a red flag law, you're trying to enforce a law before it's been broken. And that's a really difficult thing to do. I mean, you take somebody's word for it, and then you confiscate someone's property and their right to self-defense as a result. This is a really difficult thing to enforce by any practical measure. And I just don't think it'll have the outcome either that a lot of Democrats hope that it will.
We had the would-be assassin said he was medicated on Justice Kavanaugh. Same thing for this shooter and Uvalde. And there's some consistency there with the last few younger shooters. Do you think we have to find out about the prescription drugs that maybe are being prescribed to teens that might be depressed or show some signs of imbalance?
It could be, but the thing is now you're talking about tens of thousands of people. So it's really hard to find common threads throughout all of these people. Now, some of them are lack of a father in the home, right, which destabilizes them in a very fundamental way. I think most of these mass shooters do not have a father in the home.
That would be an interesting thing to look at, actually, because, not having a father in the home or involved in the person's life, I think that's gonna have a huge impact. Now, obviously, you're gonna have exceptions too, where the person can rise above that stuff, but that does have an impact on people for sure. And the drugs too. I'd be curious if any of you guys have any comments on that. Please comment on it in the bottom, because that's a huge debate, right? Like, how many kids are medicated these days? How much effect does that have? So like, again, when you got like stuff like Ritalin and stuff like that, like I know a kid in my daughter's class who has ADHD, and he very nice kid, but he just can't stop. He can't control his what he does with his body. Like, he just does impulsive things, right? Now, obviously, that's a little bit of an extreme to go on a mass shooting. But the point is, like, what are these drugs doing to them mentally? Let's keep going here.
There is drug use, I think. I need to look at each case specifically to answer that question, but I do think some kind of drug use is a pretty consistent thread as well through all of them, and they're all men. So there's another thing to look at. But in the end, again, I want to say this, it's very hard to legislate away these anomalies. These mass dramatic shootings, which are very different from your regular gun violence, which is usually committed by a very specific subset in inner cities and gangs, right, and drug cartels and drug gangs. But this mass shooting thing is really, really difficult. It's like a social contagion that has been occurring in our country ever since Columbine. Very difficult to prevent something like that.
Congressman,
I'd be curious to, why do you guys think all these mass shootings are happening in the States? I mean, you can't just say it's because of all of the access they have to guns. Well, I guess you could say that. But there's got to be something deeper to it, you know what I mean? Because, again, look what happened in Toronto with the guy with the car. He just snapped one day and decided to drive on the sidewalk, and I think he killed, 10 or 15 people. So, I mean, if you're going to kill, you're going to kill. You're going to find the weapon to do it no matter what. So put down in the comments, why are these mass shootings happening so much in the States? Why are they not happening nearly as much in Canada or any of the other countries out there too? It's interesting to think about. Now, personally, I think a lot of it does have to do with the amount of guns in the States. You got a huge amount of guns, more than the population, and then you've got all it takes is a few individuals with some kind of mental illness or something like that, and then away you go, right? Let's continue here.
That's why politics can't get into it. You need level heads, experienced people, law enforcement experts, detectives sitting down and going over it and then presenting it, maybe a blue ribbon study group. But we'll see. The Senate's optimistic they're going to come up with something. Appreciate you joining me. Always great, Congressman.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, so we'll stop it there. One thing I liked what the reporter said is having a level head. A lot of these policies are always enacted in a highly emotional state, and that's how government manipulates. That's how a lot of people manipulate, right? When we're in a highly emotional state, when do you ever make your best decisions when you're in a highly emotional state? You got to kind of take a step back for a minute. You're more able to be rational and reasonable, right? But the thing with these situations is they are so emotional because they're so terrible. Okay, the last thing, we're almost there, guys. We're almost there. Thanks for hanging in there. The last thing I wanted to talk about is this article. So this is a video I found just talking about the government on ending the vaccine mandate. So if you didn't hear, for people in Canada couldn't go on trains and planes for a while if they weren't vaccinated. So they've ended that. Well, actually, the word they've used is suspending it. So now what they're saying is they want to redefine what fully vaccinated means, and they want to make it into 3 doses. So this is just a quick one. I'll play this for you.
What we also know from Dr. Tan and every other expert on COVID-19 is that although 2 doses still protects significantly well against severe disease and death, 2 doses are not enough now to protect against infection and transmission. And that is why we are transitioning now to an up-to-date vaccination.
Okay, so 2 doses are no longer enough now. So again, the reason I'm playing this is I just want to show that this government just seems hell-bent on keeping power as long as it can, keeping control as long as it can.
Definition of what it means to be adequately protected against COVID-19. Fully protected with 2 doses doesn't work anymore. Dr. Tam said that last Friday. It's now up-to-date vaccination that needs to be used when you talk about what Canadians should do, what we should expect of Canadians, and what this government should be expected to do in the future.
Okay, so that was just a quick clip. I have my 2 shots. I will not be getting my 3rd. I'm getting just kind of sick of the lies that are being spewed from the Liberals in Canada and the Democrats in the States. Let's face it, they're 2 sides of the same coin. But anyway, I just want to, that's it for the podcast tonight, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you got any value out of it, please like and subscribe, and please share it with your friends as well, just so we can get some more exposure here. My subscribers has been going up big time. And I do appreciate you all for that. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to touch on as far as the news that I'm collecting and stuff like that. I just basically, I find this stuff on my social media. I feel like you guys might be interested by it, and I go from there. So hope you have a great night, and I will talk to you soon. Canadian Range Nut, and we'll see you later.